All right, everybody, today I'm joined with a good friend, Frankie Yaptinchay. I'm super excited to learn something from Frankie because he is the Amazon Senior Voice Creative Program Manager, and they did something amazing to bring a lot of awareness to the API artists and Amazon Music. I'll let him talk more about what he did, but before we talk about what he did, though, let's get to know about the who behind the what, right? All right, Frankie, let us know, because I know music played a big role in your life, right? Like, what was the role that music played in your life that prompted you to do this project, man?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've gone back almost a decade ago now. Just kind of like the roots where I started was I played in music my entire life. I was in the band Lions Ambition. I transitioned to Amazon about 6-7 years ago, where I'm now working on the other side of the world. So I'm working both with the digital side. Amazon Music now is a digital streaming service. So not only do I work on the different projects for the labels, but I also started working on different projects for Asian and Asian American programming for both Amazon and Amazon Music as a whole.
Gotcha. So you were a performer. I knew you from that world too. And you're going to look him up. I'll type in a link in later, okay? But now you're on the other side. Yeah, you're the decision maker now. This is cool. Okay, well, man, let's talk about the what then, because y'all did really something really cool. And tell us more about that,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this year, obviously with the current climate, there was a call to action for API representation and just kind of understanding what the community is going through. So, with all the adversity happening within the last year, I thought it was really special that Amazon Music did something where we amplified our APM programming to a new level. And hopefully this is something that's going to be more normalized and reoccurring now. So we did everything from a slate of Amazon originals, which is original songs that were for our DSP, for our streaming service. We did a short film series amplifying Asian American women. That was produced by an amazing producer, Jane Shin. She's also on our team. Love Jane to death, and honestly, I think she's so much a part of this as much as I am. We also rolled out playlist series that amplified both APA artists, both overseas to also here in the United States. So Mixtape Asia, the Collective, Made in Hawaii. Those are all new playlists that we were working on that were exclusive to Amazon Music. So yeah, I mean, there's a wide slate of things. We did a virtual event with the Identity Festival, which was a big deal. This festival normally is a 10,000 plus person thing in LA. So it's usually like a big festival, happens in LA every year. Everyone from like Janae Aiko has headlined it to Mike Shinoda. In the last couple of years, obviously, we had to find a way to transition. So we went and did this on our Twitch channel, and we did some fundraising. So last year we raised over $100,000 for the United Way Southeast Asia for COVID relief, helping out with the API community. And this year we did a $20,000 scholarship for the Pacific Bridge Arts Foundation, and this gives scholarships to Asian American students in the arts. So, I mean, just having artists and performers and different media personalities come from all parts of our community, from everyone from TV entertainers to musicians to like Andrew Yang, for example, was one of our guest hosts last year. So I think it's amazing how the community can come together to raise funds and support and try to move the culture forward.
Wow, okay. Wow, you guys, there's a lot of projects you named right there, not just one. So you've been busy, my man. You've been busy. Well, then give us a little behind the scenes insight on that. Like what was the whole process like? How did the project get started, and how do you carry it through? Give us some little skinny on that if you can.
Yeah, I think how it started was obviously we've been working on these evergreen projects. So we've had playlisting, we've done content pieces for artists, but how do we make a moment, right? How do we consolidate all these into, a call to action? I think the more community-based effort and the philanthropy effort is what really stands out to me. It's for us to rally together to do 2 years of fundraising during this time where concerts aren't available, where I think that there's a lot of ambiguity what's going to be happening in the music industry. For us to come together to raise money for the API community, I think that was super special. I think that from all the different labels and artists, producers, behind the scene people that came in and donated and also kind of amplified this whole performance, I thought it was super amazing. There's a big Korean group, Korean K-pop group, ATEEZ, who was our headliner, and it just shows that they went and did this festival for us. And working with them, and this shows the international reach and shows how big the community really is globally.
All right, so it looks like there's a lot of things going on. It's a lot of momentum, right? But was there any challenges, any pushback experience? Tell us more, man.
Yeah, I think the challenges are for all Asian Americans and Asians in entertainment, especially in Western culture, right? There's always going to be challenges of why this is important, which community, because to be honest, like you don't hear a lot of these artists on mainstream radio or see them in television shows or movies and films, right? So it's like I think it's understanding like there is a personal bias, obviously, because we were raised in this community, right? We understand the artists, we understand the community of how this started, but the equal equity that it gets within like the different larger entertainment space, like you rarely see them on award shows. You rarely see them as lead characters. There's a lot of different negative stereotypes for both Asian men and women, right? So it's like I think it's more so to trying to like knock down those barriers and finding ways to show why this is important, not just for this particular month, but as like a year-round program, and how these communities can be amplified, right? And like how can we find ways that it's authentic and not just forced, right? I think that's the biggest thing that we didn't want to do. We wanted honest storytelling, and we wanted honest content creation, right? We want it to be like, this is content that artists would make no matter what, even if we're behind this or not. But for us, as being such a large company, such a large DSP, to help tell these stories in an authentic way was super important. So I think, as far as pushback, I don't think there was really like pushback. I think it was more so, someone had to raise this to the forefront. I think in every kind of media, right? We're seeing this in every TV, film, music, right? Like sports even, right? Just to kind of see Asian faces in mainstream media just wasn't as normalized 10, 15, even 5 years ago, right? And now it's almost undeniable. BTS got nominated for their first Grammy, but not in like the world category, but as in like the record of the year category, the song of the year category. Asian American films are getting Oscars, and you know what I'm saying? They're setting records. There's Marvel films with Asian American leads. So I think it's just more so normalizing it and kind of taking it to the forefront and coming up with a plan to engage the community, but also doing this more consistently.
I love it. I love what you said too. Don't do it just for that 1 month. Keep this going and normalize thing. I love hearing that. All right, so all that's amazing, right? But from your experience or from hearing from other people, like what were the impacts that was born from this project you're doing?
I think there was a large impact. I think putting Asian American faces on billboards in New York and LA, and seeing these content creators in the same spaces as who's on the top 40 and where there's big films. I think the impact is, this is now becoming normalized, right? But for a lot of artists, this is the first time this is happening. This is the first time they're getting this exposure. Maybe they get it overseas, but they haven't got it in their own hometown, which is the craziest part, right? A lot of people think the artists are from overseas. I'm like, no, like they're actually from like California and like New York, you know what I mean? But the kind of love that they'll get more exponentially will be in like the Philippines or in Korea, right? Because they're Korean American, Filipino American, Chinese American, right? So like they'll obviously have their roots back, and that's maybe where they'll gain their fan base. But the equity they haven't got in the United States, seeing on mainstream, like opening up like Amazon.com, where you would go buy your shoes and see those ads would have Asian faces on it during that month. For these artists, I think there's a big impact for that. I think this is something that's the first time we've gone this big with it. And I honestly feel like this is only going to be the start. I honestly feel like I'm glad that this is happening in our lifetime, right? So definitely really fortunate to be part of it, and really fortunate to hopefully move the culture forward in a positive manner.
Gotcha. So if I'm hearing correctly, a lot of it is just bringing more awareness, that more representation of people in the mainstream media, because it's been so long, right? And we don't just fit one mold, because we always see martial arts stars, you know what I mean? But there's more to us than that. We're very creative people. There's a lot of excellence in the API community. So I think I want to go back to in the beginning what you said, because this last year it's been very difficult for the API community, right? Because all the Asian hate going on, right? Kind of want to ask you a question. How do you feel what you did help stop Asian hate? Let me know your thoughts on that, man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything that I did was anything that's different than years previous, right? And just that now there's a platform. So I would say, how did it stop Asian hate, or how did it like help kind of lead the awareness of it? That's a good question. I'm trying to think how to scope this. I think the programs that Amazon Music worked on in the last few years during kind of this time of adversity that's been amplified with kind of like the negative stereotypes, obviously with COVID and things of that nature, I think it did contribute to a company level where there was a call to action. And I think that anytime there's a call to action that comes into such a visible space, then you can bring awareness to maybe groups that aren't as aware. I'm sure you and I can talk about this even 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There's always been challenges in the Asian community, right? There's always gonna be negative stereotypes. People just essentially, I don't know. There's people. There's always unbiased racism that will always be in certain individuals, certain hatred that'll always be there. With the internet now, it's just kind of been documented, and now it's being amplified because, it's during a time where there needs to be a reason why certain things are happening. And I always say this too when I have an interview or when I'm talking internally. I can't speak for the entire Asian community. I can't even speak for all of Asia. Because I was born in the United States. Most of the time, it's one of those things. But I will say that I resonate with, the community. Obviously, I grew up in a household of Asian and Asian Americans, right? So I think that the impact for Stop Asian Hate that I'm trying to help with is bring awareness that this is something that's been happening. This is something that isn't new. The last 2 years isn't when people would feel unsafe. I honestly feel that the communities have been hurt in the past. There is negative stereotypes that have been evergreen since the beginning of time, right? But I think what our programs did was give the authentic storytelling to kind of help what you said. What was we're not just doing martial arts. Asian women aren't just sexualized. Asian men aren't just being demasculinized. There's storytelling. They do rock, they do hip hop. We do everything, right? We're on the same level and bandwidth as pretty much everybody else. So I think what's really important about the program that I helped work on in the last couple of years, that we got to showcase a lot of that. And we got a lot and to do that with such a big company, it helps kind of kill some of these negative stereotypes. And I hope it does. And I hope that obviously raising money, will also help with those communities that suffered during this time.
That is true. That is true, my friend. That's a great answer. That's
I didn't know where to go with it.
You spoke from the heart.
I had to go dial back a little bit, but
that's true. All right, so let's talk about allyship, because everybody wants about, hey, how can I be an ally to the API community? I feel like Amazon did a great job of that. So what did you notice? What was your takeaway? Some of the key points on how to be an ally? Let me know more.
I think the best way to be an ally is to have an authentic conversation and make your actions intentional. I think there's a lot of passiveness when it comes to support systems, and there's a lot of just they want to assist because maybe it's the right thing to do culturally, or maybe it's the right thing to do corporately, or maybe it's the right thing to do peer wise, where there's an empathetic position. But I think it's having an authentic understanding of where this community comes from, why it's kind of unfamiliar to see Asian faces in the leads of movies in America. Why it's really unfamiliar to see Asian artists kind of break out in the mainstream. I think having those conversations and understanding why those negative stereotypes happen, that's a great way to be an ally. I think working within the community in the right spaces, working with organizations that have actually been doing the groundwork for years, supporting Asian creators, supporting the Asian arts. I think but in an authentic way. You ever see those things where everyone's trying to get some sort of apology, we want to apologize. I'm nah, I don't think it's no one asked for an apology. I think it's just we just need some understanding, and it's kind of let's just be treated with the same equity. If I apply for a job and the other guy applies for a job and there's not many Asian leaders in the group and you want to build a global product, then it's going to be very difficult to get different perspectives if you want to build a global product. I think those are the type of things that I feel that's the best way to be an ally, is understand what their goals are, and let's say it's corporately, but then also understand why our community may be marginalized in certain ways. And maybe it's hard to understand because it is very difficult to understand unless you're an Asian person, right? And this resonates with any kind of BIAP kind of community. I feel the best way to be an ally is honestly working with our community and having authentic conversations, and coming from a place of actual, I hate saying the word authentic again, but actual care, and I feel that's, your actions speak louder than the words. And I honestly feel, I think there's a lot that happened in the last 2 years that's been super special to see different communities coming together that I never saw come together for the Asian community ever. So I think a lot is happening in the right place.
Yeah, authenticity. That is the core of it. I love that answer, man. Okay, so now I'm gonna throw it back to you, though. Okay, this is your experience. Okay, now from all these amazing things you've done, what was the biggest takeaway, and most importantly, what can we outside of the Amazon music world that can take away from your experience? That if we want to amplify, API community, what can we do? What can we learn from you, right?
From what I learned, it's what they always say. It's like you build it and they will come, right? And if you like come up with a plan and speak up, I think that's another part. What's very like Asians and Asian Americans were kind of like conditioned early to be very passive, in our conversations, especially working with Americans, right? It's always very much like, don't get too crazy, don't get too loud, don't bring up the biggest ideas. I think what you just have to learn, what I had to learn too, just kind of like be okay with like creating this plan, build allies within the group, build trust within your community, build trust within non-Asian allies, so then they can understand that this is coming from a place of like we want to all grow together. And it sounds cheesy, but this is how we're all going to unify and actually progress going forward, right? So I think that's what I think. If there's any learnings from, I think not even just Amazon Music, but like every company, right? You see it all, like how many Asian, like McDonald's was I think the first person to like post about Stop Asian Hate, and a lot of companies use that as an example. They're like, wow, look at McDonald's. Like it was very unwarranted. It's like, Stop Asian, like there was no real caption. It was just like they just did it really early on, and that resonated with me. And I was like, you know what? I think I might get McDonald's. I don't even eat fast food as much anymore, right? But I felt like good about that brand, right? And I think that's just what I learned, was just like speak early. I'm sure there was someone there who spoke up though. Was like, I think we should post about this and show our stance with this community. So if there's any learnings, I think it's just like, be aware of the situation. Don't only be available when it's convenient, and also understand that like these things happen for a certain reason, and it's from these certain conversations that aren't happening within different communities early on and growing from it. So hopefully this is just another seed that's a building block within our community, that we can kind of find a bigger reach within these spaces that we weren't meant to like occupy. A good friend of mine told me this, this is the one that may not tie to this question, but I feel like it applies to like this whole conversation. But your advocacy will be present in the spaces you weren't meant to occupy. So it's like your advocacy speaks in the spaces you weren't meant to occupy. And I took that to heart. And I was like, wow, man, because you don't have to do anything really. We can all kind of be quiet about things. But I think the fact that there's different individuals speaking up in a lot of our communities, even you doing this, like you don't have to do this, I'm sure. But this is something you're doing because I know you care about the community. And this will speak volumes, because those were spaces where like we weren't meant to occupy probably a couple years ago. To say, hey, I'm gonna go bring an API speaker and have a conversation about a topic that's more relevant to my community but it should be relevant to everyone's community. So I think that a lot of us are doing this now. I think that's the takeaway that we're seeing in action.
Man, wow. Okay. Thank you for the answer, man. That's super informative. I think it's also empowering. You're right. Just build it and it'll be there. You got to take the first step, So yeah, man, I totally agree with you. All right, well then let's talk about something fun then. Okay, at the end of this, okay? Now, in your experience, working with so many API artists, right? Like, who are some people that we should follow? Who should we know about? Who are doing activism on their own? Like, give us some, update on that, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, honestly, like, Dumbfounded, amazing MC, Ruby Ibarra, Ray Ami, Audrey Nuna. I think all these artists are like, honestly, hang on, turn this off, are just, to me, like really pushing the envelope. The whole 88 Rising roster. I mean, Richard Bryan, Guapdad, Nikki, Warren Hugh. There's so many good artists now that I'm like, wow, man, this is like an amazing surplus of just like artists, even from Seattle, like Hollis, like amazing. I think there's like really just a lot of artists that are coming up, but also who've been here that are now starting to get their recognition. Jay Park, I think people that I honestly feel like should be in, I guess, on the westernized main stages, are starting to make their way, but they're making great content. And I honestly feel it's a great time. Obviously, on the advocacy side, Hate is a Virus. I think what they're doing is fantastic. Gold House, I work with Gold House Co. They've been amplifying Asian American artists in entertainment and music and film, and the work they've been doing. So I think a lot of these different groups, GoFundMe had their own Stop Asian Hate Foundation that raised, I think, over $7 million in the last 2 years. I think Hate is a Virus just peaked their 1 million mark. So I think there's really a lot of different communities that are working within the art of the different communities. Asian Americans Advancing Justice, they're another group that I had a chance to work with as well. Like, they're all doing great things. And there's also like different groups that are advocating for all this, that are working in the industry. I think the Asian American Collective, they're one group that I definitely had a chance, really fortunate to work with. that are very much amplifying Asian creators and bringing people together in different spaces. The Transparent Arts groups, right? Like there's a lot of great groups. So I can go on and on talk about all these great peers, man, but there's so much talent, man. There's so much great things happening in the community, man. So I'm just happy that, you know, being in this position now, you know, 10, 15 years later, past my career when I was more of a creative, it's super inspiring. I was like, man, you just kind of like look at it from afar, like, man, that's super crazy to see all this happening and getting opportunities to do this in my profession is definitely a blessing.
Man, dude, this is so inspiring, man. But no, you're right. You're the spotlight to bring all these things that's happening that I mean, I didn't even know about it, to be honest with you, until you mentioned to me now. So, you know, thank you for doing all you do, man. All right, hey, Frankie, you know what? I appreciate what you do. Thank you for the insights. You know, keep doing amazing things, man. I appreciate you, man. Everybody, Frankie.
Hey, appreciate you, man.
Hey, take care, man. All right.
All right, brother.